All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I've been creating a series of video presentations that I'm using to explain the main components of a website. I did 9 on HTML, and this is the third one that I'm doing on CSS. All right, so we talked last time about colors, and I do want to mention one more thing, not about colors, but these things, as I mentioned, are called selectors. This says I want every H1 in my document to be red. I want every H2 to be white. I want every H3 to be blue. Now that's both a blessing and a curse. For instance, what if I want in here, what if I want just this first paragraph to be dark, to be bigger, and I want these to be the default size? All right. Well, the way it's currently written, I can't do that because this is saying all paragraphs should be this size. If I know that I only want one paragraph to be of a different size, only one paragraph, let's say that first one, all right? So I want that first paragraph that's right here, I want this to be of a different size. Let's say that I want this to be really big. All right. Well, I could come in here and I could give it an ID, and I could say that's equal to big para. And it's totally fine to do that. It's an ID, and it says big para. So I'm going to change this so that instead of saying P, I'm going to say # big para, and this is case sensitive. So now look at how it's changed. Only the first paragraph is bigger, and the other two are the default font size. Now, a couple things. First of all, by making that an ID, I'm assuming there's only going to be one of these on a page. What if I have a whole bunch of them? In other words, what if I want the first paragraph and the third paragraph to be big para? Then I shouldn't be using an ID. Remember, if something repeats or has the ability or the possibility of repeating, I should use a class. Now, when I go back, it's going to look, well, it didn't work. Yeah, it didn't work because I have to go back into my CSS file, and instead of making it a #, I've got to make it a dot. Now you'll notice that the first and third paragraphs are bigger. All right. So if you only want to change some of something, so not every H2, but only some H2s, for example. All right. What if I came in here and did this? What if I came into that H2 in here where I've got, where's my H2? There it is. And what if I said here class equals big para? Do you think that'll work? I do. And notice now by making it bigger, it's the same size basically, if not a little bit bigger than the H1 is. All right. But it's showing you one of the reasons, or one of the, I'm not going to say bad things, but big para is not a good name. Because that's assuming that you're using it just on paragraphs, and I just used it on something that wasn't a paragraph. Calling something big is not a good name. All right? And what is a good name there? Well, again, sometimes you might go to work for a place, and they may tell you the naming convention. I could just call it, for example, larger text. Now, I'm not saying that's a great name, but you get the idea. That means that I've got to go back in here, and every place I put in this, I got to change it to larger text. And save, and it again now looks the same way again. All right. Now, it is very important, and we've talked about this before, that you understand the difference between IDs and classes. An ID should only appear once on the page. What does that mean? All right, what does that mean? That means that, for example, if I decide I'm going to come into my body section here, and at the top, I'm going to put in a header. And I know there's only going to be one of these. And I know I want to style it. I might just style it by saying header and using the name of the tag. Or I might come in and give it an ID and just call it what it is. But if I'm going to have several headers on a page, and that is permissible, then I should be using class instead of an ID. So again, with an ID, the thought is there will only be one of them on a page. With class, the idea is potentially there could be several of them on a page. So previous to this, we just used selectors. But again, using something like an H1, as you saw, changed all H1 tags, H2s, etc. All right, so then we went in and we started adding classes and we started adding IDs. Now, this is an example, and we'll look at this more later. It's not going to do anything because there's no code in there. But if you remember earlier, we had talked about coming in, and I'm just going to quickly do this. It's going to look really bad, but don't worry about it. H1, and this is going to be my logo. I'm going to pretend there's a logo for that place, okay? And here I'm going to come in and I'm going to create an unordered list, and I'm going to say an unordered list is full of list items. Notice if I say li times 4 and I hit tab, I get 4 of them. Kind of neat. And if I say, what is it? li times 4, oh boy, a tag? Nope, that didn't like that. But there's a bunch of shortcuts in here. How's that? So li times 4. All right, let's just come in here and say a href equals index.html home, and I'm just going to copy this and we'll make changes to each one of them. So let's suppose we've got a home page, an about page. Another page we'll call services. And finally, another one called contact. Now, you've seen this kind of thing before. When I come over here, there's how it's changed. Okay, no big thing one way or the other. All right, I just wanted to show you that. However, if I decide I want to style this differently, now I've got a thing in here that says ID equal header. All right, so I can come in here now, and I've got my ID equal header. So I'm going to put in here header, and let's just suppose for a minute that for what I want in here is I want my background color to be black, and we know a bunch of ways to do that now, but I'll just put in here pound 0000000. All right, and we'll put in our color, which is our font color, to be white. So we'll put in FFFFFF, like that. All right, now what happened? Well, notice what happened. We changed just the coloring of that. All right, and we told it to change everything that's in there. What if I didn't want to do that? What if I only wanted the background color for the logo? All right, what if I only wanted the background color for the logo? Well, I've got here H1, and I might come in there and say ID equals logo. Why would I do that? Now I can say header logo. Now, just the background color for the logo should be black, And the color for the logo should be white. In other words, how did this change? Well, it looks like none of it changed, so let's take a quick look. All right, well, and it looks like none of it changed, so let's take a quick look again. Whoops. We said header, ID equal logo. Header, logo. Pretty obvious here that it didn't work because it's red. Oh, I think I know why. Because we overrode it down here. Remember, that's an H1. So we overrode the H1 right there. So let's, for right now at least, let's comment this out and see if it did indeed take our change. All right, there it is. It's black, and so the background color we wanted to be black, and the color we wanted to be white. So it's being overridden in here as well, someplace. All right, so header. Let's just try doing this, pound logo. All right, that says with an ID of logo. Notice it's black with white writing. And if I flipped it, so if I made this, and I made this, now it's the opposite. All right, well, what I'm trying to show you here, and I don't know why that first one didn't work. Let's try just header space pound logo and see if it takes that. And it did. I needed a space in there and I didn't put it in. All right. Now, if I want, going back into here, let's say for my UL, I want this to have a class equals, I don't know, let's say big list. That's a stupid name, but I'm just the one I'm going to use for right now. And now I come in here and I say header dot big list. All right, and I come in, I don't know, font size 4rem. Pretty obvious what happened there. All right, and we can also use this, just so you know, if you remember from the last lecture, one of the things that we talked about in our last lecture was going in, and I'm going to get rid of this because this is just silly. All right, but one of the things that we talked about in the last lecture, in fact, I removed that big list. So what happened? All right, it's still got it in here. So what's the problem? All right, it still says class equal big list. And did I save? I did not. Now that I saved, it's back again. But it didn't give me an error. So you can put in all of your class and ID tags before you put in the CSS. All right. What I'm going to do as I start to build this website is I'm going to build each CSS page. I'm going to build each page first using just HTML, and then I'm going to add the CSS to it. All right. Why I did that, I don't know, but there we go. Okay. One of the things that we talked about the other day too was coming in here and instead of setting all this stuff up like this, For instance, and I'm going to get rid of this class of larger text and this one. I'm just going to start removing the stuff that I've been putting in there in this big list. Okay, that kind of stuff. But what I want to get across to you is that at times, at least, when you're doing this stuff, you might decide also, so for instance, what if I wanted to take these three divs and I wanted to be able to, or these three H1s, and do some work on them as a group. I could come in here and say div ID equals, again, kind of a silly name, but 3 headers. Okay, and I'm just going to call it that. And then we're going to take and close this right here. All right, now I'm able to style all of these at once if I indeed want to. Just these 3 headers though. So notice if I come down here and put in another H1 tag, and I'll put an H2 in here, and I'll say hello. Hello from H2 land. And underneath that, I put in an H3, and I say hello from H3 land. And finally, I put in an H4, and I say hello from H4 land. Okay? Now, I come back in here with this ID of 3 headers. Okay? I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to say hash say, 3 headers, and I want all of them, the color to be green. All right, and I come back and take a look, and what's green? Well, that one's green, that one's not, that one's not, that one's not, and that one's not. What the heck happened? Well, let's take a look. We've got #3 headers here, color green, okay? And it tried to apply it to everything that's in here. But then it found something more specific. So again, remember in here, that was green, that was not, and that was not. So it went in and said, okay, so what do we have here? Well, we've got here 3 headers, but we also came in and we said, we've got larger text, etc., and all of this other stuff. So we had something that said all H2s. Now, if I remove these, so notice that H1, the reason it applied it is that was commented out. Notice now none of it's applied. So again, why did that happen? ID equals 3 headers, #3 headers, color green. All right, is the text color on any of these green? None of them that I can see. Well, let's also come in here and let's try to also set the background color. We'll make it pink. So notice it did the background. It applied it overall to the div. So it applied it to the entire div and only that div. All right. And you might say, well, why did that happen? It actually makes a lot of sense. All right. And what I mean by that is when we set this up, what did we set 3 headers to? We set 3 headers to the div, not everything inside of the div. All right. So if we come back in here And now we say there's 3 headers. And if we also say 3 headers H1, 3 headers H2, and let's leave it off of the H3. All right. Doesn't like that comma. So there we go. Now notice we've got the green in here. All right. So you have to be specific, all right, when you're doing this. What I wanted to get across in here was a couple things. First of all, if you want to change just one thing on a page, and you know it will only be the one thing, always, you are 100% sure there will only be one of these on a page, you're probably best off using an ID, which again is done with the hashtag. On the other hand, if you think there's even a remote possibility that whatever it is, you might have more than one of them on your page, then you want to use a class. So you use a hashtag or a pound sign with IDs. You use a dot or a period with classes. Next thing to realize here, because I haven't been doing a good job of it. Logo wasn't a bad name because that's what we're using for our logo. Header, of course, isn't a bad name. H1, the selectors, but larger text, not really a good name. The other thing I don't want to do is I don't want to call it something like 2rem text. Now I could do that, it's not illegal, but what if later I decide I want to change that to 3rem? I've either got to change, remember to change this, or have it named one thing and have it have a value of something else. All right, so it's really easy as you're working your way through this stuff to make mistakes. All right, but what we're going to start doing in here is really laying out our pages. All right, and what do I mean by that? Well, again, if you remember the example, I'm just going to quickly bring it up here and show it to you, and I mean quickly. From yesterday, we did this, right? This thing, the world's best chocolate chip cookie. Now it's real big, could not get back down to 100%. So there, that's what we made yesterday. All right. Technically, at least this should probably be on its own page. All right. And we're going to be getting into that shortly.